In today's industry of rapidly growing products, user experience UX design has become increasingly important. It clears that design-led companies outperform their competitors. Prototyping plays a vital role in the process of creating successful UX design, but for many teams teams, prototyping is still one of the most confusing part of the UX design process. No wonder it's unclear. A prototype can be almost anything from a series of paper sketches representing the different screen or state of an app to a fully functional pixel perfect app. Karon daw nga generation, ang user experience design kay dako og importansya sa industry. Then ang prototyping, yung vital role is creating a successful UX. But still naiuban nga mga product teams ga confused about sa part sa prototyping sa user experience design processes. In this topic, our objective are low fidelity prototyping, state transitional diagram, and visual basic prototyping. We often hear the term prototype in a lot of a different context. Because of this, there might confusion regarding its meaning. In its basic form, a prototype is an expression of design intent. Prototype allows designers to present their design and see them in action. In the context of digital product, a prototype is a simulation of the final interaction between the user and the interface. Depending on what a product team needs a prototype to do, it can simulate an entire app or just a single interaction. A prototype is a simulation of how a finished product will work. It allows product teams to test the usability and feasibility of their design. So, dire i-test na nila ang usability and feasibility sa ilahang design. A lot of people confuse prototypes with sketches, wireframes, and mock-up. These assets are not prototypes. The idea of simulation read interactivity is essential for prototypes. That's why static assets such as sketches, wireframes, and mock-ups can't be considered prototypes. So, ang sketches, wireframe, mock-up, dili gid siya considered nga prototype kay. Pero interrelated sila sa prototype kay mag-una magyud himuon ang sketch. I-upgrade dayon himuon na siya og mahimo dayon siya wireframe. Pag manag sa wireframe mock-up, kaya din siya mahimo og prototype. What is fidelity? Prototypes don't necessarily look like final product. They can have different fidelity. The fidelity of a prototype refers to how it conveys the look and feel of the final product. Basically, its level of detail and realism. So, sa word nga, they can have a different fidelity. Mao na ang high fidelity ug ang low fidelity. Fidelity can vary in the areas of visual design, content, interactivity. Pero gatawagon gyapon ni siya og the characteristic of fidelity. There are many types of prototypes, ranging anywhere between these two extremes, low fidelity and high fidelity. Product teams choose a prototype's fidelity based on the goals of prototyping, completeness of design, and available resources. So, ilang yun choose ang prototype's fidelity. And now, we will discuss the low fidelity prototyping. Low fidelity or low-fi prototyping is a quick and easy way to translate high-level design concept into tangible and testable artifacts. The first and the most important rule of lo-fi prototype is to check and test functionality rather than the visual appearance of the product. So, the most important daw sa lo-fi is to check and test daw sa function rather than sa mga visual appearance. Here are the basic characteristics of low-fidelity prototyping. First, visual design. Only some of the visual attributes of the final product are presented, such as a shape of elements or basic visual hierarchy. So, only some lang kanang dili gid tanan i-present. Second, content. Only key elements of the content are included. So, only key elements ra. So, the third is interactivity. The prototype can be simulated by a real human. During a testing session, a particular person who is familiar with design acts as a computer and manually changes the design state in real time. Interactivity can be created from wireframes, also known as connected wireframe. This type of prototype is basically wireframes linked to each other inside an Pros. Inexpensive. The clear advantage of low-fidelity prototyping is its extremely low cost. So, klaro kaayo nga, ang advantage sa low-fidelity prototyping is dili kaayo dako, gamay ra kaayo. Fast. It's possible to create a lo-fi paper prototype in just 5 to 10 minutes. This allows to product teams to explore different ideas without too much effort. So, para sa mga product teams, it's very possible daw sa ila gyud ang to create a lo-fi paper prototyping in just 5 or to 10 minutes. Collaborative. This type of prototyping stimulates group work since lo-fi prototyping doesn't require special skills. More people can be involved in the design process. Even non-designers can play an active part in the idea formulation process. So, even daw, bisa daw dili ka ng master sa design, pwede daw ka ma-part sa idea formulation process. Kaya sa yun raman daw na. Clarifying. Both team members and stakeholders will have much clearer expectation about an upcoming project. Cons. Uncertainty during testing. With a lo-fi prototype, it might be unclear to test participant what is supposed to work and what isn't. A low-fidelity prototype requires a lot of imagination from the user, limiting the outcome of user testing. So, during daw sa testing, kung ikaw user sa low-fidelity prototype, dapat daw master ka mag-imagination sa mga daghan nga things. Limited interactivity. It's impossible to convey complex animation or transition using this type of prototype. Popular techniques. So, paper prototyping and clickable wireframes are two popular low-fidelity prototyping techniques. Both techniques are focused on providing the fastest possible way to iterate design ideas until both the project team and the stakeholders are happy with the basics. So, ang popular daw nga technique sa paghimo sa fidelity prototyping is sa low fidelity prototyping is paper prototyping and clickable wireframe. So now we will discuss the paper prototyping. Paper prototyping allows you to prototype a digital product interface without using digital software. The technique is based on creating hand drawings of different screens that represent user interfaces of a product. While this is a relatively simple technique, it can be useful when a product team needs to explore different ideas and refine design quickly. This is especially true in the early stages of design when the team is trying to different approaches. So, mao na niya ang isa sa mga technique sa low fidelity prototyping. Ang paper prototyping kay pwede man ka mag-prototype without using digital software. Mag-kuan lang ka, mag-use lang kasi mo ang hand mag-create. Simple screens are drawn on the paper. A common practice for testing this prototype is to have one person play computer, switching the sketches around according to the user choices. So, mao na siya ang paper prototyping. Makita ninyo diha, di ba? Naka-draw lang siya sa papel. The benefits of using this technique include leverage common design skill. Everyone can sketch, even those who say they can't. And this means that everyone can build paper prototypes. So, kita tanan maka-make taog paper prototype. Allow early testing. Testing prototype early lets product teams find big picture problems such as unclear information. Support rapid experimentation. Different user interface elements can be drawn, cut out, copied to make extras, and then assembled on a new piece of paper. With paper prototypes, it's also possible to mimic complex interactions such as scrolling. User interfaces can be quickly prototyped and tested. Serve as documentations. Unlike digital prototypes, paper prototypes can be used as reference for future iteration. Notes and revision can be written either directly on the prototype or on sticky notes attached to the pages. So you can see in the left side picture the paper prototype. Facilitate adjustment. Using paper prototypes, it's possible to make changes during the testing session. If designers need to add a change to the prototype, they can quickly sketch or respond or erase part of the design. So, using prototypes daw, pag ang designer na add or i-change sa prototype, dali na daw nila ma-erase or ma-respond kay paper prototypes man nilang gamit. Paper prototypes can assist in documentation. Notes and revision will support designers and developers when they will create an actual product. If you want to use paper prototyping for usability testing, it's important to consider the natural limitation of this technique. Okay? An additional person is required to conduct the test session. You'll need at least 2 people to conduct the test. One person will be the facilitator computer that help the test participant walk through the design, and the other person will be actually testing the app. So, mao na siya ang required pag mag-conduct daw og test session. It's hard to convey complicated operation. Paper prototypes are less suitable for visually complex or high interactive interfaces. Considering the advantages and disadvantages, it's recommended to use paper prototyping during the early stages of designs only. when a project is still abstract or in the process of forming. The further the team gets in the design process, the more significant the gap between paper prototyping and the final product will be. So mas tiada gyud og first imong buhaton is mag-use ka og paper prototyping para tiada kayo ang result sa imong design.
Clickable wireframe. A wireframe is a visual representation of a product page that the designer can be used to arrange page elements. Wireframe can be used as a foundation for low-fi prototypes. Clickable wireframes are the simplest form of interactive prototype created by linking static wireframe together. In short, a wireframe is a black and white line drawing that's used in early stage web design to provide stakeholders with a visual representation of a web page's layout and information architecture. Just like paper's prototypes, clickable wireframes often don't look like the finished product, but they do have one significant advantage over paper prototypes: they don't require a separate person to work as a facilitator during the testing session. The benefits of using this technique include existing design delivers can be reused. During a particular phase of the design process, you'll have wireframes or sketches that represent your product's UI design. In most cases, it's possible to use them to create a clickable flow. And also, benefits of these using techniques includes bring clarity to your projects, allowing you to work through all the interactions and layout needs. Wireframe gets your client thinking about what their needs really are and helps them define their project goal and what their primary focus should be. Layouts can be easily changed. Designers can easily adapt wireframes based on user feedback and repeat the testing process. With the right tools, it's easy to create or modify click-through prototypes without spending a lot of extra time. Low fidelity prototype can be created using tools for presentation such as PowerPoint or Keynote.
So, mao ni siya ang basic prototype in software like PowerPoint and Keynote. So, mao ni siyang example. They can also be created using tools made specifically for prototyping. Using such tools has one crucial advantage. You can move from a low fidelity to a high fidelity prototype without switching the prototype tool. So, mao ni siya. Pag mogamit daw sila og tool, ang kanadang low fidelity prototype, pwede daw na nila mahimo og ma-level up to high fidelity prototype.
High fidelity prototyping. High fidelity prototypes appear and functions as similar as possible to the actual product that will ship. Teams usually create high fidelity prototypes when they have a solid understanding of what they are going to build and they need to either test it with real users or get final design approval from stakeholder. Let's talk about the understanding of what are they going to build, so it will be approved from stakeholders. The basic characteristic of high fidelity prototyping includes visual design, realistic and detailed design. All interface elements, spacing, and graphics look like real apps or websites. As you can see, visual design representing that all of your interface to graphics, it will look like a real or in a website. Second is content. Designer use real or similar to real content. The prototype includes most or all of the content that will be appear in the final design. As you can see, the content is one of the important because it tackles about that design use real. The designers used to be real, similar to the real content, because it will be attractive to the user. The prototypes include most of all the content that will be appear in the final design. It is tackle also the final design. So the content that will be appear. Interactivity. The prototypes are highly realistic in their interactions. As you can see, one of the focus in this is realistic in their interactions. So it is normal to have a realistic interactions. Pros. Meaningful feedback during usability testing. High fidelity prototypes often look like real product to users. So prototypes often look like a real product to the user because they're representing a nice and compatible product. This means that during usability testing sessions, test participants will be more likely to behave naturally as if they were interacting with the real product. So they are representing on how you interact on the product like a real. Second is stability of the specific UI elements or interactions. With high-fi interactivity, it is possible to test graphical elements like affordance or specific interactions such as animated transitions and micro interactions. So the stability of specific UI elements or interaction is talk about the graphical elements such as animated and transition and micro interactions. Easy buy-in from clients and stakeholders. This type of prototypes is also good for demonstrations to stakeholders. It gives clients and potential investor a clear idea on how a product is supposed to work. An excellent high-fidelity prototype gets people excited about. So it talks about the important demonstrations. It is good also for the stakeholders. According to easy buy-in from clients and stakeholders, it also gives the potential to other investors and clear and gain some idea. An excellent high fidelity prototypes. Cons. High cost in a comparison with low fidelity prototypes. Creating high fidelity prototypes implies higher cost, both temporal and financial. So in higher cost in comparison with low fidelity prototype. So it talks about the low fidelity and creating high fidelity that implies cost and financial. So you will see the cost and financial in cons in higher cost. Popular techniques. Now let's talk about the popular techniques. A digital prototype created using a special tool. Digital prototypes are the most common form of high-fi prototyping. Nowadays, the variety of specialized software allows designers to create visual rich, powerful prototype full of interactive effects and complex examination. So most of us are knowing about the editing, designing ng some cards, like example wedding invitations. So and interactive effects and complex animations. Look how Fidelity interactive prototype create in the Adobe and mirrored on an iPhone. The benefits of using this technique include optimization for device, specialized software, and allow designer to preview a prototype in a web browser or any desktop or mobile device. This helps UX and UI designer achieve optimal layouts and different types of device. So, optimization for device are helpful to the user. So they will get and achieve what their layout are they going to look on different types. Let's clarification during usability testing. High fidelity interactivity frees the designer from having to clarify concepts during testing, allowing the designer to focus on observation instead. The least clarification during usability testing is talk about the interactivity freeze from the designer and their concept, so they will focus on observation instead. Code prototypes. A high-fee coded prototype is a solution that is pretty close to the ready-to-release a version of product. An example of such prototype will be a rich interactive sandbox that allows test participants to explore a product's different features. This type of prototyping is recommended for designers who are confident in their coding skills. So, coded prototypes, it is host persons are confident in their coding skills. So, coding prototype is also helped over those who have skills and maintain it and mostly innovate their skills for themselves. The benefit of using these techniques include familiarity with the platform's constraints. Coding allows designer to understand the true capabilities and constrain the platforms platform they're designing for. So it talks about the understanding to the true capabilities. So it is for you to know what they're designing for. Efficiency. A coded prototype can be a good foundation for a fully functions app. Assuming you're not building a one-time throwaway prototype, what you build to will provide the groundwork for the final product. It is possible to use prototype code in the final. So efficiency is the code prototype to be a good foundations. So, and the good groundwork product, it is possible to use the prototype to in the final, so you will represent it. Product will save a huge amount of the time and energy down the road. At the same time, it is important to understand that prototyping is largely about speed. The goal is not to create usable code. It is implement the design in the way that the people can interact with as quickly as possible. So so always keep in your mind that efficiency or prototype is not about create usable code, but implement a good design that people can be possible interact it with a quick understandable they will understand it quickly.
State transitional diagram. A state transition diagram, known in the UML as a state chart, is a useful model of a user-computer interaction. It models the action of a finite state machine with no state memory. This processor may be the only one state of a time. A transition to a different state is caused by the occurrence of an event or by a condition becoming true. So, ang state transitional diagram is known daw siya sa United Modeling Language as a state chart. Components of a state transition diagram are state, where the processor wait for the occurrence to cause a transition. Second is transition. an instantaneous change to another state. So, mao na siyang duha ka component sa tuhang state transitional diagram, ang state ug ang transition. Transition are labeled to show the event which triggered them and the action occurring during the transition. An event may be constrained by a guard, a condition which must be true for the transition to occur. So, ang transition gilabeled siya sa event ug ang and action. A straight transitional diagram may be decomposed into a sub-diagram in order to reduce its complexity. Two-state transition diagram can be used to model the user-computer dialogue, one diagram for the human processor and one for the computer. The pair of diagrams show the synchronization more clearly than a single diagram. Action of the user are events which trigger transition in a computer and vice versa. Expanded real use case narratives may help in designing the interaction. They record decisions about the details of the technology, which were deliberately omitted from the essential narrative developed during the analysis. So, mao ni siya ang example sa ato ang state transitional diagram.